Hello class, so today we will be discussing fertilization to childbirth. My name is Leilani Charles.
I'm Stephen Tran.
And I'm Elizabeth Keller.
So what is conception and childbirth? Conception is the period of time when the sperm travels through the vagina into the uterus to be fertilized in the fallopian tubes. Conception involves a series of complicated stages. The developing and multiplying of cells lasts up to 40 weeks, which results in childbirth. Childbirth consists of contractions, nausea, and fatigue. This process can last between hours to even days, depending upon how fast the woman goes through the 3 stages of labor. So now we will be showing a video that better explains pregnancy and reproduction.
Yeah, of course I can babysit tonight, Mrs. Robinson. I love kids. They're so much fun. You have nothing to worry about. I have a ton of experience. A baby. I think it'll be okay. I mean, how hard can it be? In order for people to have kids, a pregnancy must occur. Now that can happen when sperm, which is produced in the testicles, combines with and fertilizes an egg, which is produced in the ovaries. Now, if a fertilized egg attaches to the wall of the uterus, the process of pregnancy has begun. But how do the sperm and egg meet? There are several possibilities. The most common way for a sperm and egg to meet is during vaginal sex, when a penis is inserted into a vagina. Semen, which is a fluid that carries sperm, is ejaculated, and the sperm can swim up through the cervix and uterus and travel to the fallopian tubes, where they may find an egg. Now, if the egg and sperm unite, travel down to the uterus together, and implant in the uterine wall, then the process of pregnancy has begun. Some people get pregnant with the help of a doctor through a process called artificial insemination. This is when semen is injected into the cervix or uterus by a healthcare provider. The sperm must travel up to the fallopian tube and unite with an egg. The fertilized egg travels down the fallopian tube to the uterus and implants in the wall, and then the process of pregnancy has begun. Alternatively, doctors can bring a sperm and egg together completely outside of the body in a laboratory, and then later insert the fertilized egg into the uterus. This process is called in vitro fertilization. All of these methods may lead to pregnancy. Over the course of 9 months, the fertilized egg grows into a fetus and develops organs and bodily functions until it's ready to be born. Pregnancy and childbirth are just one way a family can be formed. Some people choose to adopt children, and some people choose not to have children at all. Oh my God, it was horrible. I thought babies were supposed to be cute and sleep all day. Who knew they could be so loud? Ugh.
Alrighty, so let's discuss a few questions. So how many eggs can be fertilized?
Is it one egg?
Yes, that is correct. Only one egg can be fertilized in the uterus. Okay, second question, what happens to the rest of the sperm that does not attach to the egg? Any volunteers? Alrighty, so the rest of the sperm will actually die off that are not implanted into the egg. And last question, how long can sperm survive in the vagina?
$30.
That is incorrect. Sperm can actually survive in the vagina to up to 5 days. Okay, so let's explain how conception really works. So in the video, it discussed in depth how it works, but we're going to break it down a little more for you guys. So to become pregnant, the following steps of conception must occur. So step number 1, the sperm must be capable of being transported to the site of fertilization, which is the fallopian tubes. Step number 2, egg transport begins during ovulation and ends as the egg reaches the uterus. So as depicted in the picture to the right, you can see what happens in these stages. So stage number 3, fertilization and embryo development is a union between the sperm and egg. The fertilization period of the egg can only last 12 to 24 hours. Following the penetration of the sperm into the egg, several stages of cell division occur. And lastly, stage 4 is conception is implantation. Once the embryo has been fertilized for 5 to 6 days, it hatches and begins the process of implantation in the uterus. Alrighty, so now that the egg has been implanted, there are 3 trimesters of pregnancy. A typical pregnancy can last up to 40 weeks from the first day of your last menstrual period to the day of birth. A pregnancy is then divided into 3 stages called trimesters. So there's the first trimester, the second trimester, and the third trimester. The fetus then undergoes many changes throughout maturation.
All right, now that Leilani went through a brief overview of what the three trimesters of pregnancy are, I need you guys to get into groups of 4 to 5 people, and we will assign each group a different trimester. And you guys would do independent research on what happens during each trimester, what happens to the baby, what happens to the mother. You will have 10 minutes to look it up. And at the end of those 10 minutes, we'll have one person from each group share their research and findings. Okay. So the first trimester encompasses weeks 1 to 12 of pregnancy. And during this stage, the baby is referred to as an embryo and is developing major organs and body systems. When the embryo implants itself into the uterine wall, a couple of processes take place. Amniotic fluid surrounds the baby and serves to protect the embryo from physical damage and also helps regulate temperature. The embryo develops an umbilical cord that connects to the mother's placenta, and this helps the embryo obtain oxygen and nutrients from the mother and also helps carry waste away. This stage of pregnancy is also the most fragile stage, so the mother needs to be aware of consuming certain substances such as drugs or alcohol, or they may risk the birth effects in their baby. After 8 weeks, the embryo will develop into a fetus. The mother also goes through changes during the stage, and these changes include increased levels of hormones such as estrogen and progesterone, which results in enlarged breasts to prepare the mother for breastfeeding. The mother may also experience mood swings and irritability and morning sickness, which includes feelings of nausea and vomiting. The mother also has, the mother's muscular contractions in her intestine is also slowed due to the high levels of progesterone, which can lead to heartburn, indigestion, and constipation. And finally, the mother also requires extra blood flow to her uterus, so her cardiac volume is also increased. So the second trimester, which includes weeks 12 to 24, focuses on the growth of the fetus. Since all of their organs are already developed, the fetus can gain 7 times its weight in the next few months and can grow to be 13 to 16 inches long and 2 to 3 pounds in weight. This is a stage where the fetus begins to kick and turn and can also respond to certain stimuli, such as their mother's voice. A substance called the vernix is also formed over the baby's skin to give an extra layer of protection. And the fetus also develops reflexes like sucking and swallowing, as well as physical features such as fingernails, hair, fat, and and fingerprints at this stage. And the second trimester is often regarded as the most enjoyable stage of pregnancy for mothers, since conditions such as morning sickness and extreme fatigue begin to subside at this stage. However, there are changes that occur, such as the increased appetite and a greater need to urinate, since the uterus is growing out of the pelvic cavity. And this growing out of the pelvic cavity also results in a release of pressure off of the bladder, which results in the greater need to urinate. The pregnancy is also more visible because of this, and high levels of estrogen and progesterone can also result in some things like nosebleeds and more sensitive and spongy gums.
The third trimester consists of weeks 24 to 40. So for the baby continues to grow in size and weight. So like the lungs and the kidneys are still maturing, and the baby can now hear and see. Normally the baby is about 19 to 21 inches long. And when a baby is born, normally they're about 6 to 9 pounds. The baby's position in the uterus changes, so the head will shift down towards the uterus as seen in the pictures to the right. And then the bones in the skull begin to soften, making it easier for the baby to get through the birth canal. So the third trimester for the mother, it's probably the one that is the most uncomfortable for her. For her due date, the closer the baby gets to the due date, the more it gets uncomfortable for the mother. The baby crowds the abdominal cavity. The mother has a difficult time getting full breaths or sleeping. The need to urinate becomes more because the baby is laying on top of the uterus and is at full like growth size. And then the mom gets hot flashes because the baby is radiating heat. And then they also get false labors, also known as Braxton Hicks contractions. This occurs when the body is starting to prepare for labor. So it's like a false labor. So once the babies are ready to be born after the 38 to 40 weeks of being developed in the uterus, the child is now ready for childbirth. There's two different ways the baby can be delivered. The first way is through vaginal birth. This is probably the most common and the most safest childbirth or birth for a child. There is medication to help for pain. Some others like to choose to opt out of being medicated. Sometimes an induce of labor is needed. This is when a doctor gives the mother medicine to start labor. The child comes out of the vaginal canal, the head first, following is the rest of the body, as seen in the picture. So once the baby in the third trimester turns its head down towards the vaginal canal, it starts to come out, hence why the skull needs to be softened. So if you look over in the little diagram, it needs to be able to fit through that tiny little hole, so the head needs to be able to shrink. That's why the bones need to be soft for it to like kind of condense towards one another. Normally when a child is doing through a vaginal birth, a doctor or a midwife helps. So normally births can be happening at the hospital or at home, which a midwife is normally assisting. The second way a birth can happen is through a cesarean section, also known as a C-section. This is when they cut through the abdomen and the uterus to deliver the baby. As seen in the picture to the right, you can tell that they are cutting through the lower portion of the stomach and then through the uterus, and then they take the baby out right above the head first and then the rest of the body. So sometimes this is a safer way for the mother and the baby. Reasonings for having a cesarean section is that the baby is not head down. This is called a breech or transverse position. So if a baby doesn't rotate its full body by the time it's supposed to come out, they normally recommend a cesarean section. And then if the baby is too large, if the mother is carrying one or more children, if the child is in distress, sometimes it's easier to take them out through a C-section. And then if an umbilical cord comes out before the baby, so if the umbilical cord comes out before the baby, it can lead to possibly getting strangled around the child's neck, which can lead to possibly death or disabilities like lack of oxygen, which doesn't help with the brain function. So that is the conclusion of the presentation. So what you are going to do next is, as a class, we're going to give you homework, and your homework is going to consist of information on the anatomy of a male and a female, and you're going to describe and link up what fertilization is and conception is, and then you are also going to describe the 3 stages of pregnancy, or the 3 different trimesters during pregnancy. Does our class have any questions? No? Okay, awesome.